Hey guys, Miss Amanda here, and I just wanted to let you know that I am so grateful we have technology, and I am so excited that you decided to join us on YouTube. And we at West Main are trying to reach everyone in your family. So we have decided we are going to start linking our kids' videos and our lessons to the YouTube video. And so if you want to do a lesson with your kids, the same one that we're doing over in Main Kids, click the link below and it'll take you to the videos. It's got some worship videos, and then throughout the week, I will be sending out through our app different activities and questions that you can do with your kids just to keep that conversation going. Just remember, parents, you are the greatest influence in your kid's life. And so if you make Jesus and the Bible and learning and studying about him important, it's going to be important for them. So I hope you enjoy doing this together as a family and have a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see you guys and hear from you. I love you all.
Hey guys, we are so glad that you are tuning in and watching this. My name is Mike Spencer. If you haven't followed us until recently, I am the worship guy here at West Main, and we are so glad to have you watching us online. Actually, that's one of my jobs, is to try to make this whole experience both live and online for you guys. And of course, it's not me alone. There's a lot of people, pastors and volunteers that make that happen. So that said, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I just want to kind of update you on a few things. We are working on trying to get our services the way they used to be, which was live, both in the sanctuary and to you. And that's coming up. December 6th is the goal we're shooting for. You may find on occasion, if you get notifications that we've gone live, you may get some awkward times in saying that we've gone live, and that's just us testing out our equipment to make sure that stuff is going to work. So that said, man, I hope you guys enjoy the service today. This series, The Witness, has just been amazing for me. And I'm hoping that if you've missed any, you can always go back and catch them both on YouTube and video from our website. They're on Facebook. If you're not one of these live video guys, you're a podcast person, we have those podcasts available as well on your favorite podcast provider. So I just encourage you to listen to those. There is a special message that Jason taught in the sanctuary. I talked about this last week, and I think we just listed as a special service. But anyway, that's a special service that Jason preached the Sunday morning. You guys watched the actual witness video live stream, and our congregation heard a different message, and then we just flipped that and made that available to you as well. So that said, I'm almost done. I just got one thing I need to talk to you guys about, and that is I have always wanted to buy a pie at the pie auction, but I never have been able to. Those pies go for thousands of dollars, hundreds and thousands of dollars, and my top limit for a pie was 25 bucks. And so I got outbid all the time. So this has been going on since the pie auction has existed, but this year I have a shot because we are doing the No Pie auction. And what we've done is we've set up on the West Main Pay app, you can go in and you can give to the No Pie auction, and you're saying, why would I buy a pie that I'm not going to get? And I would tell you the same thing Keith has been telling you, the pie is not the point. The point is that the money goes 100% to the West Main youth. You would not believe the cost of going to a camp. Having been a young guy myself, back in the days of Jesus, I had to come up with the money to pay for any of the trips that the youth went on. And this money goes to these kids' accounts, helps them pay those expenses, and you would not believe what a benefit that is. So just a few moments ago, just to test out if I could do it, I went online through the Pay app, through PayPal, and I purchased No Pie for the pie auction. First time ever I was able to purchase a No Pie at the pie auction. I was so excited that I actually gave more than I normally would have given. I would have been outbid. But I just want to encourage you guys to check that out, and always remember, the pie is not the point, but our youth and relationships with Him is. So that's my pitch for the day. I hope you guys enjoy the service and have a great week.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us again here in my little living room. This is part 4 of The Witness. So honored that you would choose to join us here on YouTube when there are so many other choices for you. Whether you are traveling, I know some of you are watching on the road right now, some of you are in the mountains at your cabin, some of you are just at home in your PJs drinking your coffee. That's great. Wherever you are as you're watching this video, so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us for part 4 of The Witness. I was thinking the other day about when I was a youth pastor about a million years ago or so. We did a lot of traveling, not just with our youth ministry. We obviously did all the camps and mission trips and retreats and all that, and so I was gone quite a bit. But I was also on a consulting team, and we would travel around the state and other states, and we would just kind of help churches and help people who were trying to build youth ministries. And anyway, that consulting team took a lot of my time and took me away from home a lot. And I remember when my kids were little, of course, poor Renee was stuck at home for days on end with 4 little children. And I remember, just like you, if you have kids, when you got home, every time we get home, the kids would say, what do you have for me? What'd you bring me? What'd you get me? And, you know, that was fun at first. And every time you go on a trip, you try to buy something for them and surprise them all. But when you got 4 kids and you're living on a youth pastor's salary and you're gone a lot, man, buying those gifts started to add up real quick. So as they got older, I stopped doing that quite as often. And I'd get home and they'd want to know, what'd you get me? What'd you bring me? And I'd have to say, just me. It's just me this time. All I brought you was me. And they were like, whatever. Back to Xbox or whatever they were doing. But eventually they grew out of that. And I'm so glad that they did, because it is absolutely impossible to have an authentic, intimate relationship with someone if you are always trying to get something from them. And you've experienced that. You know what that's like. And for me, as a pastor, I see a lot of Christians who never outgrow that stage of their relationship with God being, what'd you get me, God? What'd you do for me now? And for a lot of Christians, Christianity is just kind of reduced down to, what do I get? How do I get it? How do I get God to give me what I want? In fact, you can look at the prayers of Christians and maybe your own prayers. Your own prayers reveal what kind of relationship you have with God. When I look at my own prayer life, there are many, many times, far too often, that the only thing I'm praying about, the only thing I'm asking God for is for me, something I want, something I would like to see happen. And I don't want to be a Jesus follower who's like those little kids who are just worried about what'd you get, what'd you bring me, what'd you bring me, what'd you do for me, what'd you do for me. And in today's episode of The Witness Part 4, we're going to see some of those people who are only in it for what they can get out of it, and we're going to see how Jesus responded to them. Now, this series is based on the book of John, and John is our eyewitness. John is a man who followed Jesus not because of faith at first, not because he believed that Jesus was the Son of God at first. John followed Jesus because of the things that he saw and the things that he heard Jesus do. And so John is just serving as our eyewitness, and he kind of gives us this idea that there's a process that he went through and he's inviting us to go through as we come to faith in Jesus. And that is that there were some things that happened, there were some events, and then in those events, Jesus provided some signs, and those signs became the evidence that those early disciples needed to trust and to believe and to put their faith in Jesus. And over from the book of John, what you're going to see is that John doesn't just record what happened. John goes a little bit deeper and he tells us why things happen. And I'm so glad he did, because it's this question of why. It's the peek behind the scenes that's so important. And John is going to use an interesting word throughout his gospel. It's the word signs. And John uses the word signs to describe the miraculous things that Jesus did, the supernatural things that Jesus did. And we've looked at a few of them, like when Jesus turned water into wine, or when Jesus heals a nobleman's son, even though that guy is, a day's ride away. And we've also seen Jesus heal a paraplegic, an invalid man. And John doesn't use the word miracles, he uses the word signs, because he wants us to understand that when Jesus displayed his power, it wasn't just because he wanted to show off, and it wasn't just that Jesus was being kind, it wasn't random acts of kindness just thrown into the story. There was always purpose behind these displays of power. And John wants us to understand what the purpose is. And the purpose is that we might find and believe what he found and what he believed. And so at the end of his gospel, John chapter 20, verse 31, he gives us the purpose statement of his gospel. And here's what he says. These are written, this is John speaking, these are the things that he wrote down. These are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have. This is where we need to stop, because this is what many Christians, maybe you're one of them, this is what we're in it for. We want to know what we can have. What can God do for us? What can we get from God? How do we get God to give us what we want? And John is saying, I wrote all these things down so that you could believe, and that when you believe, you're going to have something. And this something might not be what you're expecting. But in this sign that we're going to look at today, it's a very familiar sign. You've probably heard it 100 times if you grew up in church. And I just want you to kind of set your preconceived ideas about what we're about to read aside. Try to look at this passage, this eyewitness account, with fresh eyes. Try to imagine you're one of the people that we're about to read about, and for the very first time you're experiencing these things. Or maybe go back to the very first time you heard this account, maybe in church or in Sunday school, or maybe your mom or dad told you this story. But try to look at this through fresh eyes, because these are things that actually happened, and John was actually there, and he was an eyewitness. He saw this with his eyes, and he wants us to see what he saw. If you're going to look in your Bible, it's going to be John chapter 6, and there's a heading in most English Bibles that says feeding of the 5,000. And so let me just kind of set the scene for you and let you know what Jesus has been up to as we get to this point. In the book of John, we see Jesus and his disciples kind of bouncing back and forth from the top of the country to the bottom of the country, from Galilee back down to Jerusalem. And it's about 100 miles in between. And we just kind of see Jesus and his guys spending time in one place and then traveling to the next, and spending a little bit of time there and traveling back. And Jesus, at this point in the story in his life, is about 100 miles from Jerusalem. He has gone to the very tip top of the Sea of Galilee. He's kind of gone to a secluded area, because from the time we left off last week, his friend John the Baptist has been beheaded, and that was a big deal. It was kind of sobering to all the disciples and to those that knew John, and Jesus just wanted to get away. And so he gets away in this secluded place, the very tip of the Sea of Galilee. But word has spread, like word always does when Jesus is in your area. Some people found out Jesus was there, and so John's going to tell us what happens. John 6 verse 2 says, and a great crowd of people followed him. Why? Because they saw the signs that he had performed by healing the sick. Verse 3, then Jesus went up on a mountainside and he sat down with his disciples. And John gives us this detail in verse 4. The Jewish Passover festival was near. And John wants to include that because he wants us to get in the mindset of these Jewish people. And at Passover, these people would celebrate how God used Moses to deliver all of their ancestors from Egypt. They used to be slaves. God sent Moses to deliver them and took them out of Egypt and basically established them as a new nation. Moses kind of became this Messiah figure, this Savior figure for them. And every year, these people were reminded that they needed a new Moses. They needed somebody who could come in and deliver them from the oppressive hand of the Roman Empire, who had soldiers in their country and soldiers outside their temple, and it just kind of defiled everything. And every year around Passover, not only was it a celebration of what happened in the past, they were hoping that something like that could happen in their day, in their time. And so John wants us to get in that frame of mind, that they were looking for someone to deliver them. Verse 5, as Jesus is sitting there, John says, he looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him. And so he leans over to Philip and he says to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? Here they come, a great crowd, and we're about to see just how great in just a second. But Jesus leans over to Philip because Philip is from this area. Philip knows all the good restaurants. Philip knows all the places to eat. And so he leans into Philip and says, Philip, there's a great crowd coming. Where should we buy enough bread for all of them? And in verse 6, John says, Jesus asked this question only to test Philip, for Jesus already knew what he was about to do. Philip answered him, Jesus, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. So get the scene. There's so many people. Philip says the only way to even get a bite of food in everyone's mouth is if we had 6 months' salary and we could go find a Sam's or a Costco to buy as much as we could, and it still wouldn't be enough to fill anyone's stomach. It would just be enough to have a bite. Verse 8 says, another of his disciples, this was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, and he had found a boy. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many? A lot of teachers and a lot of interesting stories about this little boy and how he was willing to give his lunch. But what's important here is the detail that this was 5 small barley loaves, and we are to understand that this is the lunch of a poor person. This is like, I have a friend who used to say he was so poor for dessert, he had to eat sugar sandwiches. He would put sugar in between 2 white pieces of white bread, and that was his dessert. And this is kind of the picture that this is the most basic, simple, poor man's lunch that this guy had. And we're to just kind of understand that Andrew found this kid with a lunch, and the kid was willing to share what he had. And so Jesus says in verse 10, okay, have the people sit down. There's plenty of grass in that place, and so they sat down. And then John gives us this detail, and it's absolutely important. About 5,000 men were there. So why does John give us this detail that there were 5,000 men there? Was he forgetting the women? Was he forgetting the children? I don't think that was his point at all. He's making the point earlier that it's the Jewish Passover is coming up, and the people were always looking for a deliverer. And then he includes the fact that there were 5,000 men there, and I don't know if this was a coincidence or not. I find it bigger than that, but the usual number, the number of men in a Roman legion, 5,000 men. Sometimes 4, sometimes 6, but the standard number of men in a Roman legion was 5,000 men. Maybe John wants us to picture that as we think about this scene, that there's enough men here that we have basically a Roman legion. We have enough men here to pick a fight if we want to. We have enough men here to start something if we need to. So all in all, if there were 5,000 men, most smart people would tell you that there were probably a total of about 20,000 people here. You can include women, and obviously there were children there. There was probably 20,000 people on this hillside, and Jesus has 5 little barley loaves and 2 little pickled fish. What in the world is he going to do? Verse 11, Jesus took these loaves, he gave thanks, and he distributed to those who were seated, and they had as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, all 20,000 had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign that Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." So you get the scene. It's probably taken hours for all of this food to be distributed to 20,000 people, and everybody's got a full stomach. And as the disciples are gathering everything that's left over, everybody's just kind of whispering back and forth and talking back and forth, and they're trying to figure out, how in the world does this man have the power to feed all of us? What just happened? What did we just see? Who is this man? And they kind of talk amongst each other. This must be the prophet. This must be another Moses. This must be somebody who can deliver us. And in verse 15, John tells us that Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, he withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So Jesus, knowing what these people are thinking, knows that they want to make him king. They want to pigeonhole him into a role of the prophet Moses, the deliverer, and they want to march Jesus down to Jerusalem to take him in front of the Romans and do your stuff, Jesus, and we're behind you and we're with you. And it is not hard to imagine that these 5,000 men, if Jesus had said yes to this, it's not hard to imagine that from the top of Galilee all the way down to Jerusalem, in every village and every town they passed through and passed by, their numbers would have grown, and they would have grown quickly. It is not inconceivable that by the time they got to Jerusalem, this group of men would have been as large as 20 to 25,000 men ready to confront the Roman soldiers, and they would have outnumbered them by a great deal. But Jesus doesn't want any part of that plan. Jesus knows that there's something bigger and better than just confronting Rome and just delivering this tiny nation. He has something much bigger in store, and he knows that his disciples are hearing the murmuring and hearing, let's make him king, let's make him king. And so Jesus goes back up on a mountainside to be by himself, to get away from that. But before he does that, or as he's doing that, he kind of puts his disciples in a boat and says, I don't want you guys to have any part of this. I want you to get out of here. And he sends them across on the Sea of Galilee in a boat. And you can read the rest of that. It's really a cool story, cool thing that happens. But at this point in the story, we need to understand that Jesus isn't going to do what the crowd wants him to do. And as long as for you, Christianity is about getting something out of it, you're just not going to get it. If for you, Christianity is what can I get out of it, you're totally missing the point of why Jesus came. And this is the problem with the crowd. They missed the point completely. They wanted to get something from Jesus, and they missed Jesus. As a pastor, I hear a lot of times, and maybe you're somebody who has said something like this, and I don't mean to offend or hurt anybody's feelings. It's just something I hear a lot, and it kind of cuts my heart. I hear, I talk to people who quit church because they just weren't getting anything out of it. Or someone will come to our church from another and say, I just wasn't getting anything out of it. I wasn't being fed. Or people will leave our church and go to somebody else's, and they inevitably tell that pastor, we just weren't getting anything out of it. And I just think as long as that's what we're in Christianity for, we're never going to get it. Christianity is not about what can I get out of it? What can I get out of it? What can God do for me? What can God do for me? How do I get God to give me what I want? How do I get my church to give me what I want? When Christianity is all about what you get out of it, you totally miss the point. It's kind of like my kids running up to me every time I came home. What'd you get me? What'd you get me? What'd you bring me? What can you do for me? Eventually, we have to grow out of that. We have to get out of that mindset, because that is not a mature way to approach Christianity. Because if you're always trying to get something from someone, it's impossible to have an authentic relationship with them. You know that. Like, remember when you were a kid and you wanted to get something from dad? Maybe you needed some money, or maybe you needed to borrow a car. You had something that you wanted and dad had it. You didn't just go up to dad and say, hey, I need this. You'd kind of do the dance and you'd do the negotiation. Hey, Dad, how was your day? Anything you need? Can I get you your slippers? How about a cup of coffee? How are you? You feeling okay? You kind of set it up and butter it up, and it's not real. It's totally fake, because you're just trying to set the tone, set the mood, so that you can slip in your question and maybe he won't notice, and you kind of trick him, and then you'll get what you want. And that's not a real relationship. It's just an immature way to approach Christianity. So John chapter 6 continues, and it's a long account. Jesus and his disciples had gone on the other side of the lake. They've escaped the crowd. They found Jesus on the other side of the lake, and they started doing the negotiation, the dance. Hey, Rabbi, when did you get here? How you doing? How was your trip? Everything okay? Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, you're looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves, you had your fill. You're looking for me because yesterday I fed you and filled your stomach, and now you're hungry again, and you're looking for some more food. You're ready for breakfast, and that's why you're here. Just go ahead and say what you want. You want me to feed you again. Jesus responds, do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him, God the Father has placed his seal of approval. If you skip down to verse 30, at the end of Jesus kind of confronting them, they say, so they asked him, okay, Jesus, so what sign will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? We're ready. What are you going to do next? Show us that miracle power one more time, and maybe we'll believe. What can you do now? You've already fed us once. Let's take the bar a little higher. What can you do for us now? And there's a back and forth, and Jesus is trying to help them see that it's bigger than food and it's bigger than miracles, and the conversation's kind of going back and forth and back and forth. The disciples get in on it, and nobody really understands what Jesus is about. And he basically says, listen, I'm not going to feed you again. You're going to go away from this moment hungry. Yesterday I fed you. Today it's something different. You need to grow. And Jesus basically says, I'm not going to perform a miracle today. I'm not going to feed you again like I did yesterday. And verse 66 of John chapter 6 is one of the most sobering and real verses in the scriptures. So from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. When Jesus said, look, I'm not going to feed you again today. I'm not going to do a miracle today. Many people who had followed him pushed unfollow. I mean, if you're not going to feed us, what am I going to get out of it? I'm here for the food, and you're not going to provide food, so I'll go do my own thing. If you're just in it for the food and the food runs out, where do you go? These people decided, if I can't have Jesus feed me, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk away. And so the question for all of us as we follow Jesus is, why are we doing it? Why are we in this thing? Why are we in this faith? What are we in it for? Are we just in it for what we can get out of it? Or is there something deeper? Never forget what a significant thing it is that Jesus has invited you into a relationship with God. Never forget that Jesus has invited you as a human being to consider God to be your Father. It's so significant. It's not a small thing. What if we just stopped asking God for things and we just started to follow him? I mean, that might be just too big of a thought for us. If you've ever been in a group of Christians and it's prayer request time, what do? Well, here's what I need. Here's what my family needs. Here's what we're asking God to do. We need God to deliver here, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what if just for a day or maybe even for a week we just said, you know what, God, I'm not going to ask you for anything. I'm just going to be content to be with you. I don't want to ask anything from you. I just want to follow you. I just want to be like you. What would that look like if we decided to do that? Remember, it's impossible to have an authentic, real relationship with someone if you're always trying to get something from them. Because if you're always trying to get something from them, you're always negotiating, you're always doing the little dance, you're always trying to set up everything just right, manipulate the circumstances so you can slip in the question and get what you want. And Christianity is so much more than just trying to figure out how to get what you want from God. So let us stop negotiating. Let's just stop trying to manipulate the situation and manipulate this man of power. What if we just stopped the negotiations, stopped trying to get everything we could possibly get from God? What if we just said, you know what, God, I don't need anything from you. I just want to be with you. See, that's what I wanted when my kids would come to me, and when I got home from a trip, I just wanted to see my kids. I just wanted to be with them. I wanted them to hug me and love me and just be glad that Dad was here. And as they grew out of the what'd you bring me stage, man, the relationships begin to get deeper and deeper. And there's nothing better now than just being with my adult kids who have grown out of the what'd you bring me, what can you do for me stage. And they just, some of them sometimes like to be around me. And it's such an honor it's so humbling, and it so just fills my heart when my kids just want to be with me. And I'm just a regular old guy. I'm an imperfect, totally flawed father. Can you imagine the heart of our perfect Father when we would just say to him, you know what, God, I don't need anything from you. Just want to be with you. What that must do to the heart of our perfect Father. So I want to ask you a question. And I want you to answer honestly. Don't just skip over this question, because it's a significant question and we all have to wrestle with it on some level. If Jesus never did one more thing for you, has he already done enough for you to follow him? Imagine if Jesus never did one more thing that you asked him to do. God, I need a new car. Can you provide the money? Jesus doesn't do it. God, I'm sick. Can you heal me? Jesus doesn't. God, this relationship is broken. Would you fix it? Jesus doesn't do it. Just imagine that if Jesus never did anything else for you from this day forward, has he already done enough in your life for you to trust him, for you to follow him, for you to love him? You need to have an answer for that. Because when Christianity for you is just all about what you get out, you're never going to have an authentic relationship with the Heavenly Father. Let's think about it like this. Jesus may not change your circumstances, but he has already changed your eternity, and that's enough. Jesus may not rescue you from your struggles, but he's already rescued you from death. And that's enough. I can honestly tell you, if Jesus doesn't do one more thing for me for the rest of my life, the fact that he was willing to come here and live and die for me and then conquer death, the fact that he has sealed my eternity and my name is written in heaven, if that's all Jesus ever did for me, That is enough for me. Eternity is enough for me. Rescuing me from death is enough for me. And I want us as followers of Jesus at West Main or wherever you would call your church home, I want us to be people who just want to be with Jesus. Not always looking to get what we can get out of him, but just be with him. I want us to be more contributors than consumers. That consumer Christianity is just an ugly scene, and the what can I get out, what can I get out, what can I get out is totally missing the heart of God. So let's be contributors, not consumers. Let's just be followers who want to be with Jesus. John would say the things he wrote them down so that you would believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing, here's what you can have: life. Life in his name, the kind of life he wants you to have. He invented life, and if he wants to give you life, you better believe it's more than you can imagine. And the life Jesus wants to give you doesn't start when you die and you go to heaven. That kind of life that Jesus wants to give you starts the moment you choose to follow him. And so let's just follow. Let's be like that close-knit group of people when Jesus noticed all these other disciples walking away and unfollowing him. He turned to those disciples at the end of John chapter 6, those original 12, and he asked them, are you going to leave too? Do you want to leave? And their response is perfect. They say, where else could we go? You're the only one that has the words of life. They got it. It wasn't about the miracle. It wasn't about feeding the stomach. It wasn't about the displays of power. It was life. Jesus offers life. Jesus offers eternity. Let that be enough for us. Next week, we're going to conclude the witness as we look at John chapter 5 or John chapter 8, and we're going to look at how Jesus heals a blind man on the Sabbath and how it just changed everything. I hope you'll join us. Thank you for being with us today for the Witness Part 4. Hope to see you next week.